Transfer window is continuing to trundle on as it does, with Leeds United being linked to more and more players, but this one's a little bit of a break from the norm that I think could be a very interesting signing if we do go for it, and potentially something to keep an eye on from a strategic point of view. So I'm going to dive into that, and I'm also going to, towards the end of the video, talk a little bit about what my personal sort of strategy and timeline and stuff is going to be for World Cup stuff, because I've had a little bit of news about something, so I will also dive into that. So let's get into it. So the player that Leeds United have been linked with is a left winger, and we have reportedly held talks with Bayer Leverkusen around signing him. Now, the source on this one is one of those confusing ones. Being the Daily Mail means that it's a little bit on the fence. They are often reasonably good when it comes to football stuff, but they are often wide of the mark when it comes to other stuff, which means it's a very sort of interesting one to sort of look at. I know a lot of people will have heard Daily Mail and gone, absolutely not. For me, that's true when it comes to their non-footballing stuff, but football, they tend to be a little bit different. There tends to be a little bit of a something actually there. The player's name is Kareem, and I'm going to make sure I read this one right, and that's why I keep looking at my notes. Kareem Albeovich is the way that I'm going to go with it, or Albeovich, something along those lines. Currently 18 years old, plays on the left wing, and he's currently rated at about 18 million quid, which is admittedly a fairly high amount of money to pay for an 18-year-old, but it's with good reason, because Bayer Leverkusen sold this guy out to RB Salzburg last year, which you'd think, okay, so why is he back at Bayer Leverkusen? That's because in his time at RB Salzburg, he managed to get himself 13 goals and 4 assists, and whilst also at RB Salzburg, he managed to get an assist against Wales in the World Cup playoff, so he's a significant part of why the Wales gang aren't playing in the World Cup this summer, and also managed to put a penalty past Carl Darlow in the shootout. Not exactly not exactly without experience for an 18-year-old, which is absolutely fantastic. If you're signing young players, that's sort of what you want to get. But at the moment, the general feeling is that the reason Leverkusen have done this is they had a £7 million buyback. So they might as well do that, and if they can sell him out for a little bit more profit, there's absolutely no reason for them to not do that. So the thinking isn't that they're signing him back with the intention of him playing a lot of football. The thinking is they're signing him back with the intention of moving him on again, but for more money. Presumably this time without a buyback clause. So that's an extra 11 million quid in their profit in their pocket, without having to actually do anything, which makes a hell of a lot of sense from their perspective. I kind of respect it, even if it's sort of annoying. From the approach of what we need to do, we've reportedly talked with his agent, which is sort of the first step in getting any move done. Admittedly, it's a step that happens even in moves that don't get done. It's a general sort of, would you fancy a move to Leeds United? Yes, I would, or no, I wouldn't. In the event that this news has sort of continued, and reportedly we might have had a conversation with Bayer Leverkusen about it, it seems to be a case of he's not exactly said no to a move to Leeds, which is fantastic. It's absolutely a genuinely brilliant start. Then we have to go on and talk to Bayer Leverkusen about it, which is where I think a little bit of the challenge comes in, and I suppose we'll find out where the story heads from there. However, it does show a little bit of a change in the transfer strategy, in my opinion, because last summer, you have a look at what we did, and it was all 26, 27, 28-year-olds, and it was all players that you could see being in the peak of their career, and potentially, like, this is their final big move before they end up sort of in the long term somewhere else. This seems to be a little bit of a return to the investment in youth angle that we saw previously under, admittedly, Victor Orta, but the fact that we're investing in youth doesn't necessarily scream it's Orta-esque as a signing. Victor Orta's thing would generally be try and find those players that no one else has seen, and the sort of edgy stuff and the sort of money-balling stuff. And his hit rate was, with young players, genuinely quite high. It was when it was older players that it didn't quite work out, because he was still looking for undervalued players, but obviously when you're looking for undervalued older players, clearly those are just players that aren't particularly good, rather than players that have a lot of potential to come on. That transition from peak age players to younger players is something that I would like to see us do going forward, and it's something that Daniel Farke specifically mentioned in a press conference towards the end of the season, where he said that once you survive in the Premier League, and if you can keep on surviving, you're able to move on to those more project players, the ones that you aim to keep for the longer term. And that's the sort of role that, I'm going to read it just to be safe, Kareem Albeovich would take, because he, being a left winger, wouldn't necessarily start over Noah Okafor, but he'd be in the wings in the event that Noah Okafor wasn't around. And let's be honest, he's good enough to fill that role. Like, the guy is scoring on the international stage. He's gone to the World Cup this summer, and we'll be able to keep a little bit of an eye on him because he's going to be playing on the biggest stage possible, which is a sort of very interesting thing when it comes to transfer stuff. The fact that we're currently at the top table when it comes to transfers, whilst the World Cup is going on, means that we're going to be able to sort of keep an eye on all of our targets, which is wonderful. It's something that you don't get in most transfer windows, but this time we will. So I'll be keeping a little bit of an eye on him. But that transition to that strategy, the one that will ultimately lead to more long-term profit over what we're doing now, which is sign players that are good right now but won't have a resale value, is how you turn from Premier League club that sticks around a bit to Premier League club that grows and develops and fights for Europe and ends up grabbing that sort of potential and finding our place in European competition and hopefully beyond in the long term, which would be absolutely spectacular. I've not seen us play in Europe, to be honest. I'm too young for that, so that coming round at some point would be absolutely beautiful. Anyway, aside from Bosnian wingers that we're likely to see at the World Cup, when it comes to the World Cup, I said that I'd talk a little bit about what my timetable is going to be looking like. The news that I said that I would bring isn't necessarily the most positive of news. I applied for the Zone 48 programme, which is a content creator per country was going to get picked to sort of cover their country with DAZN and be part of interviews and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, brilliant, that's a fantastic opportunity. I applied, had an interview a couple of weeks ago, and I've just learned today that they've selected someone that isn't me, which is a little bit of a shame, but it doesn't mean I will be doing nothing over the World Cup. As I've mentioned before, I will be continually pumping out the Leeds United videos as often as I can, because that's what I do. I will also be doing some World Cup stuff on the side. That might be watch-along stuff, that might be preview stuff, that might be review stuff, that might be general comment stuff, depending on what goes on during the World Cup. But I'm aiming to be very, very consistent with it, just because that kind of stuff is kind of fun to talk about. Like, we don't get a World Cup every year. It's every 4 years, interestingly. So I thought I'd mosey out a little bit. Got to keep in mind that I am working a lot of the events in the World Cup because I work for a broadcaster that has the World Cup rights. So that's going to make things a little bit complicated, but fairly often I will be doing videos and streams on World Cup stuff. My idea at the moment is I'm going to do a morning show called World Cup Wake Up. I've got a logo for that and everything. It's going to be fantastic. Very much looking forward to it. But yeah, if there's anything you want to see during the World Cup as well, let me know in the comments below. I will keep an eye out, because I always want to do what you guys want to watch, because that is ultimately better for both of us. Like, I enjoy doing what people like watching, so it just makes sense. Anyway, that was Kareem Albeovich. That was World Cup planning. And I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, pop a like on the video. That's lovely. And subscribe if you've not yet. And become a channel member. And all the kind of stuff. And I'm going to leave that there. Also, I'm sat next to a dry stone wall. Next to a big hill. Opposite some even bigger hills. Look at them. Them are pretty. Wow. We live in a pretty country sometimes. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. And I will see you later. Toodaloo.